Welcome to Until Saturday, Saturday Night Reaction. I'm Ari Wasserman, live from my home office, talking to David Ubben, live from his timeshare in Boulder, Colorado. I don't know if there were any crazy, shocking results this Saturday, but I will say this. This is the last weekend of college football in September, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there has been a September 30th or 31st. I don't know how many days are in this month.
I think 30.
I've never been good at knowing whether this is a 30 or 31 day month.
You got if there's a knuckle trick that I'm forgetting, but there's a knuckle trick.
I don't know. I've got baby whopper hands, but I don't know if I've gotten to this point in the season, Dave, in my professional career as a college football reporter where I had no idea, or at least not a educated guess between two or three teams of who is going to win the national championship. Like not even
the national championship, Ari. Who's going to make the playoff? Like if you we were talking about this today. If you make a passionate case for any team in the country as a playoff team, you're opening yourself up to be mocked because every team has shown you a lot of warts.
I don't know about every team.
Either now or in the past. Maybe not this season, but like the idea that like I agree that Washington's been the team that has done the least amount of shenanigans this season. But like history tells you that Washington's probably not going to get there, and maybe the Pac-12 cannibalization is already underway. And like, you know, the Pac-12 hasn't had a team. 2016 Washington.
Now here's the problem with the Pac-12, Dave, and I'll tell you. It's not that I think USC has shown some defensive warts, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But between Oregon and Washington, and of course USC, who has still not lost yet, it's hard to latch on to any of those three as legitimate national championship contenders or playoff contenders because you just don't know which one it's going to be. It doesn't mean that it won't be one of them, but there are three, and they all have pretty tough, terrifying schedules down the stretch of the season, and it's hard to feel really good about it. Like you can't even latch on to Georgia and just be like, this team is probably going to win the national championship. Now, it might end up just being Georgia, but they were in a position on Saturday against Auburn where there was some question of whether they were going to win or lose that game. So there's a lot to unpack here. First, let me just, get through the intro here. This is Until Saturday, the Week 5 reaction episode. Please like and comment and subscribe on the YouTube channel if you're here with us now watching live. If you are listening to this on Sunday morning and weren't on the YouTube channel, please subscribe to the podcast if you have not done so already. And if you want to watch them live, because we go live 3 times a week, Thursday for picks, Saturday for reaction, and Sunday for the Sound Off Show, the link to the YouTube channel can be found in the show's description. If you want to participate in the Sunday Sound Off Show, where we play your voicemail so we can have your voice, your thoughts, your opinions, what you're passionate about represented on the show, please call 316-462-9852. Again, that is 316-462-9852. You can call or text that number. We will certainly be more likely to choose your submission if it's your voice, because we want your voices to be represented on the show. Lastly, sign up for the Until Saturday newsletter, where you'll get your daily fill of college football news right to your inbox. The link to that is also in the show's description, and you do not have to sign up for The Athletic in order to receive that newsletter, though if you're not subscribed for The Athletic and you're a college football fan, I'm not necessarily sure what you're doing with yourself. So, okay, Dave.
Well said.
We aren't going to talk about a game that you were at first, and it's a Colorado game.
What?
I don't think that's the first game on the list. It's the first Colorado game of the year where I don't think Colorado is the more interesting story of the day.
I actually agree. Yes.
So we'll get to that. And I might have fooled Cam, the graphics guy. I love you, bud. I know it's late. But let's start at the grab-assiest, craziest game of the day. Ole Miss beat LSU 55-49 in what must have been the worst defensive performance you could ever remember LSU having in any galaxy brain of a memory. Now, I saw Harold Perkins go down late in the game. I'm not sure, as we're recording this right now, what his status was. But we are living in a world in the SEC West where we are a week removed from Alabama completely and utterly shutting down Ole Miss's offense.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're watching Ole Miss put up more than 700 yards of total offense in a 55-49 win against LSU, a team that you and many others thought had a chance to win this side of the conference.
Mm-hmm.
We'll start with LSU and how much of a disaster it is, but this entire side of the conference, like, is Alabama an inevitability again? Like, are we running down that road again as Alabama's kicking Mississippi State's ass as we record this?
Well, are we talking about as an SEC West champion?
Yeah.
I don't know about inevitability.
Going back to Atlanta, yeah.
I don't know about inevitability, Ari, but I think, to me, it seems very clear that there probably is not a playoff team in that side of the division, which is, and I'm sure our listeners can catch us, but I'd like to know the last time an SEC West team, well, I guess maybe last year, but like how many years out of the last 8 years, the SEC West not only not make the playoff, but not have a team that was even in the conversation, because it feels like we might be trending.
But are you making a mistake in thinking that Alabama is not going to be a part of that conversation? Like, that to me is the interesting dynamic of this, because, like, listen, who is the best team in the SEC West with all the information that we have right now?
You got to go Alabama, yeah.
Okay. And if you look at their schedule, they will be favored in every other game for the rest of the regular season.
Well, okay, but that's fine. Ari, Vegas odds are like, they're going to Alabama's a public side, so it's, what are we even talking about? The Vegas odds or whatever. You sound like Nick Saban on December 4th last year right now. But
listen. Well, yeah, there's an indication. Okay. It's not. I'm not saying it's not. They don't just say Alabama minus 17 because there's no merit to. They're very good at beating other teams.
Yeah,
and they will, in my opinion, based on what we see now that we're settling into what Jalen Milroe is and what that offense is going to be. Certainly a world where they go onto a field in Atlanta a win away from making the college football playoff. So I don't know if I would join you on that. If they're a one-loss team?
Well, but you don't think they're going to drop another game at some point?
I think it's certainly plausible. I'm not back in on Alabama as one of the four best teams.
Yeah, it's plausible that they
I'm just saying the path is so there right now. And listen, we can change the subject back to Alabama in a minute. But LSU legitimately died on national television tonight.
Yes, they did. Ole Miss, I've liked Ole Miss. I've been high on them. I thought they are a team that can beat a lot of teams. You go on the road in the SEC, you better strap it up every week. And, you can't give up 55 points and expect to win. I don't care what else happened, anything else that happened. If you do that, you are going to lose. And especially if you're on the road in any conference, much less the SEC. So LSU has its own, only itself to blame at this point. They had the talent to have a really special season. It's clear that this year is not going to be the year that they had hoped, that I thought we could see for LSU. And truthfully, Ari, I think the thing that's most confounding about it is I don't even have a good reason for why this has happened to LSU. Do you?
I don't. I really don't. Like, I know that weird. Ole Miss has a very good offense when it's clicking, but to give up 706 yards of offense with the defensive players that they have on that team, it almost seems impossible to me. And funny enough, Nick Terry brought this up, and I have to come clean. I was on the under in this game, and it was an L 5 minutes into the game. I don't know how the teams with the players that have the type of talent that LSU has ever gets into a position where it feels it's impossible to get a single stop.
Yeah.
Like, that's to me, like what goes wrong in game planning, what goes wrong in talent development, or anything of that nature to put yourself in a position against an inferior team talent-wise where you don't even have a hope to stop them once in an entire game. Like, that to me is alarming. So, I think the good news is we can finally put LSU aside for another year and say, hey, this isn't the team that is going to be making the playoff. Now the question is, and rightfully so, is twofold. One, who is the best team in the SEC West? And will the SEC West have a chance to win? And two, Georgia has been messing around for multiple weeks now. There was a legitimate chance that they could have lost this game to Auburn on Saturday. Does the SEC stink?
Well, we've been on this train for
no, but does the SEC
already.
as a whole stink?
Well, I think the odds of the SEC not getting a playoff team are pretty good at this point. Or I don't know about not getting a playoff team. Well, we'll see what Georgia does ultimately. But if Georgia loses a game, Ari, or if they lose the SEC championship, they're not going to have a ton of wins to stand on. Dare I say that there will be some consternation if there's a bunch of one-loss teams or an undefeated team there at the end. That LSU, if they do get in, that Georgia, if they do get in, would be getting in on reputation, not on resume.
So here's the thing. I think that no matter who the SEC champion is, if they only have one loss, they're in. I don't care what helmet it is.
Probably. I think you're probably right.
But I don't know if that's going to happen this year. Like, is it possible that a 2-loss team like LSU figures it out and wins the SEC this year? I think it's technically
can we not use LSU as the?
This is what you get for being as high on them as you were.
If we're going to talk about a 2-loss team getting in the playoff, it needs to be a 1-loss team currently, like an Alabama or like a, dare I say, Texas A&M, something like that.
Let the record show, Your Honor, that we're taking our LSU preseason pick and opting and tapping out from it to switch to Alabama. Do you believe?
And Ari, I will say that this was while Georgia was on the mat against Auburn. But I was at the press box today, and I think it was Pat Forty from Yahoo who mentioned to me who had Kentucky and Mizzou as the possible last undefeated teams in the SEC. I'm not sure I believe in those teams long term. Neither one of them have a win to sort of hang their hat on just yet, but undefeated is still undefeated, Ari.
And we'll get to those. We'll get to those teams later in the show.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I think we need to talk a minute about Georgia. Did you watch the game at all today?
I did watch quite a bit of it. I had my custom multi-view that I created on my own. Watching up, I had a second screen while I was in Folsom Field today. And Georgia, it's a lot of messing around every week.
Here's the question I want to ask you, because I'm happy
down
you said
double
that.
digits at home to South Carolina a couple weeks ago.
I'm happy you said that.
Mm-hmm.
Messing around. Because my notion of the South Carolina game was just that. Messing around is a synonym for grab ass.
Mm-hmm.
Is Georgia just messing around? Or does Georgia have offensive warts that are going to rear their ugly head in a big-time matchup whenever that occurs, and they're going to lose because of it?
Can it be both?
Are they messing around, or do they have ailments?
It should be both. You have no business letting Auburn move the football as easily and as consistently as they did today. And also, just offensively, you should be better on the line of scrimmage and be more competent in terms of getting the ball to your skill position players before you end up where you've got to force feed the ball to Brock Bowers. God bless him.
And by the way, stepped up like an actual man out there today. That one catch that he had. Here's the thing with
Brock Bowers. People get annoyed with the Brock Bowers conversation because he doesn't put up crazy numbers and people talk about him like a god tier player. But it's because that's just who he is. Like, I talk to a lot of coaches. I've had multiple coaches inside and outside of the SEC say that Brock Bowers is the best player in the country. I've had that multiple times in the last, 2-something years, that he does so many things well: blocking, catching, run after the catch, pure speed, strength. Like, that's the best player in the country. And people scoff at it because he'll have 4 catches for 30 yards in some games, and Georgia doesn't need to give him the ball as much as he is. He's a pretty low ego sort of guy. He lays pretty low. But like you saw today, that this is why people talk about him in that way, because it seems like when he's needed, he is unbelievable. And he made play after play after play and forced people to tackle him. And they had a hard time doing it, Ari.
Yeah. And I see a lot of comments on Twitter. I think that this is just commonplace when your team is not firing on all cylinders. But there are a lot of Georgia fans who are not happy with Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator.
Bad day for all coordinators today.
Yeah.
I think I've heard a call for at least 15 coordinators to be fired today, Ari.
Yeah. So I'm on high alert. I don't know if you think this is a tough stretch, but if you go look at Georgia's schedule, the one that we've all mocked all year for not having any tests. They don't have a Alabama on there. They don't have a Dave Ubben LSU, the version of LSU that you thought they were going to be.
Before we move on, there is Ari. That version of LSU can show up at any moment, can they not? They already have 2 losses.
But even that version of LSU isn't on the schedule. There is no LSU on the schedule.
Yes.
But here's their stretch that I want you to tell me about, like on a scale from 1 to 10, how hard getting through it will be undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
Florida, Mizzou, Ole Miss, Tennessee in 1 month. Back to back to back to back.
It is hard for me to envision them not losing one of those games.
So that's where we're at right now with the SEC and the 2-time defending national champions.
Well, it's worth noting, Ari, because the Georgia conversation is complicated because they are Georgia. They are the 2-time defending national champions. There is this notion that, well, you got to vote on number 1 because they haven't lost. They won the championship. If you were voting on what you've done on the field this year, could you put Georgia in the top 7?
Top 7?
Top 5.
It would have to be a discussion, and I think that's the answer you're looking for. I don't know if it's a definitive
I think you could very clearly not. Like, what have they done this year that has impressed you, other than just like have a bunch of dudes and be studs that don't look it very often?
I don't know if this is a hard thing to do off the top of your head right now, but let's do the top 5 team definitively or not. I'm gonna say a team, and you tell me if they're definitively a top 5 team.
Okay.
Michigan.
Well, can we not talk about Michigan because the schedule is what the schedule is, and they've taken care of business and looked a little ugly?
I mean, you're not going to go to prison if you're right or wrong here. I just want to know what your opinion is.
I'm going to say yes because nobody scored more than 7 points on them all season, and regardless of who you play,
I think yes.
To that. Yes.
Listen, there's more. Like my mentor and first colleague at a professional newspaper was a man named Doug Lesmerises. Do you know him?
Not personally, but obviously I'm aware of him in the business, yeah.
But Doug makes a lot of waves, or used to make a lot of waves back in the days when he would vote in the AP poll, because he would only take resume into account every week. So if you have the best win of the season, you are number 1. So for instance, Duke on his ballot when they beat Clemson might have been number 1 and not Georgia. And that infuriated some people. But in his thought, as the season goes on and you gather more information and the resumes start to bear out evenly, the cream will rise to the top. And I kind of feel like when I talk to you,
you're in the polls,
and you're for that thought process. I feel like because you don't seem to value eye test at all. And it's like you could watch Michigan play football this year, and yes, their schedule has been dog shit. But Michigan, maybe for a quarter or two this year has played grab ass a little bit, but they haven't sweated this year. And like you say, there is something to be said about taking care of your prey easily. So from that standpoint, I don't think Doug would rank them very high in his thought process because they don't have the on-paper results or a marquee win yet. But the way that I view it is, do I think that based on what I've seen and the way that they've played against the schedule that they have in front of them, have they played definitively like a top 5 team? I think that the answer to that question is a resounding yes.
Yeah.
So that I think Michigan is one of them. Okay, number 2, Texas.
Yes, clearly.
I agree with you. Number 3, Ohio State.
Yeah, they got the wins. Yeah.
I know, but when you watch them play.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give it to him.
I am on the fence with Ohio State, but
You're too hard on Ohio State, Ari, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I am. I get accused of that a lot.
You definitely are, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, I just love them so much. I just want them to be the peak versions of themselves at all times. Maybe that's what it is.
I'll just tell you what.
Big freaking Buckeye Homer hater.
I would coin flip Washington and Oregon as my other 2 top 5s. Just to tell you.
Okay, but I was going to get to Florida State and Penn State. We haven't even got to those.
No.
So, in that sense, I didn't even bring up Georgia. So, if you wanted to leave Georgia out of your top 5 based on the Doug Lesmerises thought process, certainly. But also, Doug Maurice doesn't really have anything in his thought process that would make you think that Georgia's a top 5 team just based on eye test, because they haven't been good at that either. So I don't know that they've had either, even though when you watch them, there's a resounding feeling of talent oozing off the players that are on the field. They haven't looked like gladiators out there. So I can get behind that a little bit. So, okay, before we move on to the next set of games, somebody, and I think it was it you that said he is like 1-19, Lane Kiffin?
So it was my guy Shehan Jayaraja who wrote for CBS.com. So that against teams that won 9 games.
9 games, yeah, that's right.
Lane, I believe, was 1-19 with his only win coming as an upset over Oregon when he was at USC. Now it's worth noting, LSU's got to win 9 games this year. And as much as I want to believe that is very likely, if you told me they win 8 and 5, I can't say that I would be just passed out on the floor. Just telling you.
Here are Lane Kiffin's biggest wins as a coach. Beat number 7 Kentucky last year, number 11 Texas A&M in 21, number 7 Indiana in the COVID year. Is this Lane Kiffin's marquee win as a head coach?
Probably. Here's the thing. I judge marquee wins by, okay, I don't really care what they are when you play them. I just don't put I don't care about the top 25 at all.
Yeah.
Pretty much ever. It doesn't matter. I don't.
Well, it's the only litmus test that we have in the moment to compare it to.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. But when we get to the end of the season, we can look back. So I care about what did that team rank at the end of the season. Now it matters a little bit when you played them, but in general, like that's what you see at the end of the season. So I would look at who did he beat and where did they rank at the end of the season. Like Indiana in 2020, I mean, that's not one of the 7 best teams in the country. It was a pretty good team that won some really dramatic games and was a really fun team. Shout out to Michael Penix. But like, and like last year, Kentucky, that's not one of the 7 best teams in the country. So I'd like to look at we should reassess, where these teams are. Cause I think it would be I think the short answer is probably, but let's let the season play out. For now, I think for sure you could put that as his marquee win. Definitely.
Okay. So let's put a bow on that. Another exciting game at the end of the evening was Notre Dame's close win over Duke. They won 21-14. They went for 2 in the last minute of the game to cover the 5.5 point spread. They got it done this week when they failed to do so a week ago at home against Ohio State. They only had 10 men on the field in the last 2 plays of the game. As you all know, Ohio State won in the last second, and that was a heartbreaking loss. We did not know how Notre Dame was going to show up this week. And Duke, for all intents and purposes, is a pretty good team. Yeah. I don't know if they're a great team, but they play really freaking hard.
They're one of the 25 best teams in America.
They're certainly a top 25 team.
Yeah.
And they have a really good quarterback. So whenever that happens, you have a tough game. Sam Hartman picked up a critical 4th and 16 with his legs after getting stuffed short, trying to pick up a first down with his legs by Ohio State a week prior. And then Audric Estime ran in a go-ahead touchdown as they were trying to run the clock out to set up a field goal attempt. Notre Dame's final drive, 10 plays, 95 yards, 2 minutes and 4 seconds, and the 30-yard Estime run put them ahead by 5. They got the 2-point conversion by 7, win by 7. And the toughest thing about that is what an awful break for Duke at the end. Not only did it feel like they were about to win the game, because it felt that way on that 4th and 16 before Hartman picked it up, but you also see Riley Leonard take what looked to be like a pretty nasty ankle injury.
I've never hoped for a high ankle sprain. I hope that's a high ankle sprain.
I hope it's a high ankle sprain.
He's certainly like you see a lot of high ankle sprains where like they're in a ton of pain and it's like, oh, that's broken, and you see it bend weird. He certainly acts like it was a break, but I've seen a lot of ankles where you think it's a break and it ends up being a high ankle sprain. I hope for his sake, for Duke's sake, for college football's sake. I mean, he's a super fun player, super talented player. You saw the mutual respect there at the end. Sam Hartman waiting for him outside the injury tent. I hope that Riley Leonard, we can get him back on the field. Yeah, there was that portion from the late 3rd quarter into the 4th quarter where they were leading. I mean, he was giving Notre Dame fits. Like they could
that
not
one
stop
run
him.
that he had where he broke contain on the outside and ran down the field for 30 yards and set up the go-ahead touchdown. I don't know. I had a lot of respect for what Duke was doing. And obviously, it doesn't matter what team we're talking about. Whenever a really good player goes down, it just stinks. It's the worst part about the sport that we love. So I don't know how much context this gives you for Notre Dame. Maybe this puts a feather back in Ohio State's cap to give them a little bit of a nod since I'm too hard on them. But is Notre Dame a team now 2 weeks removed from hosting USC that could maybe make some noise again here?
Yeah, I mean, I still, this is a little bit like, we were texting a little bit during the LSU Ole Miss game. If LSU is going to win that game, it's like if you go on the road, and it's not a conference game, obviously, for Notre Dame, but you're on the road against a Power 5 opponent, a top 20 opponent. I don't really care what you do. Win the game. Win the game. And it's a quality win that I think is going to hold up in December. I still think Notre Dame is probably one of the 6 or 7 best teams in the country in terms of just how good is your team. I'm not talking on resumes. And that's, you got to win games. You got to win tight games. Like, you're going to play good teams. If you're one of the 6 or 7 best teams in the country and you play one of the 20 best teams in the country, it's not going to be pretty. You're not going to probably dominate. You're going to need to catch some breaks, make some plays when you need to make some plays, and win the game.
Because their players are on scholarship too, Dave. Did you know that?
Yeah, it's true. I've been told that. And by the way, Notre Dame and Duke, those are got to be 2 of the most valuable scholarships in the country. So shout out to those guys for their $200,000 situation there. But it's you got to win these games, and Notre Dame won that game. And this is a game that a lot of years they have lost. And then you look up in November, and Notre Dame's 9-3 and kicking themselves. And if Notre Dame is going to crash the playoff or be a team that competes for a national title, you got to win these games.
Well, I wonder too, because it's a talking point. You always used to think that the price of being independent for Notre Dame was going undefeated. Do you still think that's true?
What do you mean? That they can't? Because their schedule is usually so hard?
The price of being independent is that you have to go undefeated to make the playoff.
No. They get if an 11-1 Notre Dame is always going to have at least 2 really good wins, right? Just by nature of their schedule.
Well, the only time they ever got in with 1 loss was when they were in the ACC for that 1 year.
But they haven't been like a playoff caliber very often. Where like, oh, you got a team that people feel like is in that mix. There's not been a lot of times where you're sitting there where Notre Dame's got a playoff team and you're like, if they were in the Big Ten, they get in here. That's just not something that really happens.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame has to be big Ohio State fans, and they have to hope that Duke is pretty good, and they have to beat USC and then win out, and then I think they might have a seat at the discussion table later. But
they will, and they can do that.
But it was an important win to keep the diversity of the playoff discussion out there, because Notre Dame, if we did the in and out game, and I'm not talking about the best burger and fast food, I'm talking about the in or out, alive or dead in the playoff race game, I think you most certainly have to place Notre Dame in the alive section.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it's very reasonable for them to win out. I love them on both sides of the ball because they're really good on the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And you have Sam Hartman, and that's a guy that you saw it tonight. You want the ball in his hands in clutch situations. That's why you go get him. We talked about it in week 0, Ari. This is a marriage that I think can work in a lot of ways, and you saw it work tonight, like schematically, processing, arm talent, all those things. Like Sam Hartman, he's not the next Caleb Williams, like freak talent, but he's really, really good and really, really smart, makes the right decision, gets the ball where it needs to be a lot, and he's pretty accurate. And
may I say, maybe one of the most handsome college football players of all time.
It's unbelievable. Like,
he's like a heartthrob.
I don't know what he did to be blessed with the hair that he was blessed with, both on the head and the face. As somebody who, I go bald out of necessity. I had to come home early, and this situation is very patchy. I got to just tip my cap to the man. It's impressive. Yeah. Speaking of impressive, Ari, by the way, West Virginia, they just blocked a field goal to beat TCU and move to 4-1. shout out to Neil Brown, coaching for his life at West Virginia. The Ears might be one of the 3 or 4 most surprising teams of the year.
Yeah. Sam just posted that in the chat too, and you were talking about that before we went live, and it's always cool to see teams, perform a little bit better than you anticipate that they would. But I think this is probably the perfect segue to the game that you were at today. USC, Colorado. USC scored a bajillion points in the first half. Seemed like they were just going to kind of go the same route that Oregon did last week. And then Colorado basically controlled, I think, most of the second half and had an onside kick situation there to try to get a possession to tie the game. What was your main takeaway from this? Well, let me tell you mine because you were there and you have to talk.
Yeah, please do. I'm curious what you thought.
My main takeaway from this game is that USC is not a serious program because they can't take defense seriously.
That's fair. I think that's fair.
It's like they stink at defense. And if you look at their schedule, I think there's like a less than 10% chance they go undefeated this year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think there's less than 30% chance they get through this thing with 1 loss.
It's the first time that Colorado's played in a game this year and been the less interesting storyline, in my opinion.
It's true.
Like, I think that Colorado did a really good job of weathering the storm, making sure they didn't get their doors blown off 2 weeks in a row. I think that they've proven that they are a gritty, fun team to watch without their best player, and Shiloh Sanders didn't play either. Am I right?
Yes. And there was another starter in the secondary. I got to be honest, I'm not sure who Deion was referencing as the third starter that was out, but they had missed Shiloh, they missed Travis. I mean, Cam Stillman Craig was in there. I'm not sure he was referring to, but either way, Colorado is who Colorado is. I think we kind of know who they are. I mean, the schedule sort of revealed it. Like, they're going to score a bunch of points. They're extremely flawed. They can't protect. They can't really cover that well, but they have enough skill position talent that if you can't score, they're going to score on you. And if they're not playing in a really good defense, like, they're going to put up some points and they're going to scare some teams, but they're really flawed. And that's some really big flaws that they are not going to be able to outweigh. But USC's flaw is it's interesting. So I was sitting next to our USC writer, Antonio Morales, this today. And we were just kind of talking, and, he's watched USC a lot more closely than any of us, obviously. He'll watch them, second watch, all those things. And it's a lot of busts beget busts. And you kind of saw that today. They were really solid the first quarter and a half. And maybe even longer than that, is that I'm watching them. I'm like, USC, they're tackling well. Their defensive game plan today was fantastic. They were playing really soft on the outsides. They were playing a lot of cover 2, just saying, we're not going to give up the big play. And they knew that Colorado was not going to be able to protect Shedeur enough to be able to dink and dunk their way down the field. And that's why you saw a lot of comeback routes, because their offense is a post-snap read offense. That the receivers are going to have to read what the DBs are doing. And so they weren't going to take a lot of shots downfield because the corners are so soft that it's all comebackers. And if you throw an 8-yard comeback and they're tackling you, and then you got to do that 10 times, but you can't protect Shedeur, then you're getting behind the chains.
Eventually, it's not going to work.
Exactly. It was a great defensive game plan, but then they got a couple busts, and then they got a couple busts, and it looked like they got a little lazy when they got up 3 touchdowns, and it's, we're back to where we are with USC, and we're back to where we were at Oklahoma. It's the same story.
And there's some thought process here in the chat. Craig Diaz said Lincoln Riley will never win a national championship even if he fires Grinch. Matthew C. is in the chat saying, I think we can say by now that Grinch isn't the problem. Riley just doesn't put a premium on defensive recruiting, especially on the lines. And, I don't know how much I buy all that. I'm sure that if he wanted to get a 5-star defensive tackle, that he'd be certainly all about the idea of that. But I don't know if it's a talent situation in Texas and California. His 2 main, talent grounds at Oklahoma and USC just not having dynamic defensive linemen in the state very often. Maybe that's just a dumb theory, but that's the theory that I've had.
They do have Bear Alexander playing for him. It's not like they got like 10 of them like Georgia seems to have, but like I scoff anytime anybody brings up talent with USC.
Well, I just don't understand why USC is in a position where it feels like getting a stop is hopeless for them. Like watching that game in the second half, if you were one of these poor souls who had USC minus 21 in this game. Can't imagine.
Ari, are you one of those poor souls? I feel like you might have been.
It's like Colorado just like ran the game for 2 full quarters.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, maybe that was just USC with their heads up their ass because they were winning by 100 in the first half and weren't trying that hard anymore. But it's like, even if that's the answer, that's just unacceptable. So, I watch USC and I see Caleb Williams doing the things that he's doing. I see the offensive talent that he has, and I just feel like it's being wasted. I feel like we don't know it yet. We don't know what game it's going to be. We don't know if it's going to be next weekend or the weekend after or the weekend after that. But eventually, this team is going to lose, and it is going to lose because they give up 50 points to somebody. It might be UCLA this year. It might be Arizona. It might be anybody.
It could literally be anybody.
Literally going to happen.
Yes.
And it is such an uncomfortable feeling because their fans know it too.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times, and maybe the answer is every year Lincoln Riley's going to have one of the 3 best quarterbacks in college football. It seems to be the run that he's on right now going back to Oklahoma. Every year their team has a distinct quarterback advantage. But I can't shake the thought process. But even with Baker and Kyler and Jalen, that this is the biggest waste potentially of talent at the quarterback position. I don't know. Drake May. We'll see what happens at North Carolina. I mean, there have been teams.
Johnny football, Ari?
Yeah, we've seen. I don't know how the hyperbolic sentence I was going to go there. I caught myself, but
okay.
I'm also think it's in the realm of just like truly remarkable, unbelievable, inexcusable, and disgusting. Like, I think that's all true. And I don't know what has to change. I don't know if you think it's the coordinator, the recruiting results, the talent areas in which you recruit, anything. It's a freaking disaster, dude.
Well, it's not even as bad on the field, Ari. It's that Lincoln doesn't seem nearly as panicked he doesn't seem like he's taking this as seriously as the fan base is, as everybody who's watching this team is. He's saying, hey, I feel like things are, okay. Obviously you want to be better, but he's got full confidence in Alex Grinch, all these things. And I think there's a way to diplomatically say, like, this isn't good enough without throwing your assistants, without throwing your players under the bus, all those things. And I was talking to Antonio today and I'm like, do you know how hard it is to be sitting here in year 2 with an undefeated team that played for a Pac-12 title the year before? You're undefeated. You have a returning Heisman Trophy winner. You are in the top 5. And your fan base is livid and about ready to revolt. That's hard to do. That's hard to do. Because on paper, you should be feeling pretty good. But then here in the real world,
you know why, David?
People know it's coming. They know it's coming.
A wise man once told me, it all comes back around in the morning. It does. I don't know, Wolf of Wall Street lines on this, but the chickens are going to come home to roost.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And you know it. We've seen it. We saw it last year. And hey, they got pretty close to getting away with it last year.
Well, and Ari,
this is a different conference now, though, bud.
Well, it is. And the thing is Caleb has to be great to win almost every game. And they're going to play teams later this year where he could be great and they could still lose.
Yeah, because the other team has also really good quarterback talent.
Yeah.
And great skill. Can you put this up here, Cam? Sooner Magic said this is all happening was at OSU and you guys didn't, or OAU, and you guys didn't care.
I mean, they did win the Big 12 like 6 years in a row. So but I don't think they're going to win the Pac-12 this year.
I think we were very definitively on board of they're a fun team with a great offense, but they're never going to win a national championship. I don't ever think anybody ignored.
No.
If you saw them play LSU in 2019 and didn't have a takeaway from that, then I don't know what we're doing. But this isn't
that felt like bullying.
I don't think that it took him to go to USC for us to know that his defense has stunk. And there were a few years at OU where his defenses were actually passable. So, there is hope there that, because the saddest thing about this, then we'll move on. It doesn't even need to be elite, David. It just needs to be serviceable.
Top 65, top 75 in defensive yards per play, and you're a playoff team.
Mm-hmm. But no, they'll get into this weird game with USC where I will say this about the Pac-12 that just don't seem to be true about other conferences. And maybe this is last year's Pac-12. But the amount of games in the Pac-12 that I watch where receivers are open by 10 yards in every direction happens way more frequently than any other conference that I watch. And I don't know if that's just a style thing or if that's just in my head or if I'm just wrong.
Talent scheme.
But there are more breakdowns in the Pac-12 where people are inexplicably wide open on every play. Where it's just like a 20-yard gain every play because you throw it to the middle of the field and the guy could sit down and light a fire with 2 sticks and then get back up and run again before somebody comes anywhere near him. Happens quite frequently, and I feel like the USC-UCLA game is the illustration of that notion. And I know what's coming. I know it's coming, and it's a damn shame because Caleb Williams, we're all blessed to be able to watch him play football this year, and it's a shame it won't be in January in the playoff. I'm out on them, and I'm going to write Andy a $1,000 check because I was wrong. So,
well, I said last week, Ari, to me, USC looks like the 3rd best team in the Pac-12. And maybe that changes over time, but based on what I've seen this year, looks like the 3rd best team in the Pac-12.
Yeah. Washington's at Arizona right now. They're winning 21-10 at the beginning of the 3rd quarter. I think they just went 3 and out on their first possession in the second half. Arizona's getting the ball back. I went to U of A. They always seem to be good for one of these close games against a really good team in Tucson once a year. And I'll tell you, the Zona Zoo, very underrated student section, the way they line it up from the 10 to the 10 on all one side of the stadium. That's maybe some shine that U of A is going to get that they might not get on other podcasts just because of my experience going there. But I always feel like Arizona has one, trick up their sleeve game a year. So we'll see how that goes.
I'm still kind of mad at Rich Rod for ruining Khalil Tate, but that's my main Arizona take.
Yeah. Okay. How about another game? I'm very interested to hear how you're going to twist and turn and play the game Twister on this one.
I mean, they served up a bean for me, Ari. This is easy.
Despite a slow start, Texas took care of business at home, defeating number 24 Kansas 40-14. The Longhorns only led by 6 points at halftime, 13-7, but then outscored Kansas in the second half, 27-7. Let's put it this way. Kansas didn't have Jalen Daniels. I think he was dealing with back spasms or some back injury.
Yeah, it was like a weird
They kept him out of the game. And Bean played pretty well, the backup quarterback who's actually had quite a bit of experience for Kansas the last 2 years because he's been needed. Texas played that brand of football that you've warned us about 1.2 million times on the show. And then they won by 100.
Yeah.
So did that change your thought process at all? 661 total yards, 9.3 yards per completion, time of possession 40 minutes and 26 seconds. And I believe they rushed for roughly 1.9 million yards. Let me go get the actual stat. But they just rolled through them. Jonathan Brooks, 21 carries, 218 yards, 2 touchdowns. Quinn Ewers, 25-35, 325 yards on the touchdown. Grab-ass game that turned into a blowout against a top 25 team that can score. I was just tweeting in the middle of the game, oh God, no, Texas, not today. Don't do it to me. I'm not a bad person. That was me kind of you in my head. That's old Texas. New Texas woke up and kicked their ass.
Yeah. Well, first off, agree to disagree on Jason Bean, whatever. But
he's a good player.
Okay.
He makes plays.
Okay.
I've seen way worse backup quarterbacks.
I mean, that's a low bar. It's Kansas we're talking about, Ari. It's not like they're the paramount of depth. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Here's the thing, Ari. This is the best Texas team I have seen in a long, long time. That is very true. I think they are very good on the lines, and that gives you a very high floor and a very high ceiling. All right. I'm in on Texas. I'm beginning to trust them more and more every day. I'm being sucked in so that when they inevitably disappoint you, Ari, I too will be surprised. I won't just be saying I told you so. But this is a really good Texas team, and I think it's just a matter of you've got to stay invested every single week. This has been an issue. They're more talented than every team they play a lot, but I think they're a lot more talented I'm saying this is not to denigrate what Texas is doing. It's a weak Big 12. This is a down year for the Big 12. It just is.
And if I would have said that before the year started, you would have said it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Because I did say that.
Yes.
In the beginning of the year.
It's true.
And you said that doesn't matter. They always lose to inferior teams. So I'm just going to keep you honest.
It's true.
It sounds like you're starting to come around.
A little bit.
That said, big-ass game this coming Saturday.
Yes, huge. Yeah. Listen, Ari, I'm going to note that this team has had the blessing of playing backup quarterbacks in consecutive weeks. That is both a fact, and I still stand behind everything I just said. I am very excited for
Is that the
Red
butt?
River. No, that's not the butt. I'm just highlighting facts, Ari. That's a fact. They played 2 backup quarterbacks in 2 weeks. I'm just saying that's true.
Texas has now faced 3-time transfer JT Daniels, Bama's worst quarterback in 15 years, Wyoming's backup, Baylor's backup, and now Kansas's backup. That was a tweet that Antonio Morales sent us.
That's just facts. Either way, I think you're going to get an invested Texas against what I think is a really good Oklahoma team, Ari. Like, I'm in on Oklahoma, and I think Texas is better, and I think you're going to get an invested Texas that plays a really good game. I can't wait for Red River. We've had some iffy Red River games, and this is not going to be one this year. I don't think the Big 12 is going to be celebrating it. Maybe Greg Sankey will show up at halftime for this one and, get his first corny dog at Fletcher's and maybe a fried Snickers. But ultimately, Ari, we need to summon something. Well, hang on. We need to summon the hive mind on this because I feel like we do need a Texas playoff bet. Even though I'm coming around, we need to ask the listeners for inspiration.
I'm not eating the death
no one chip.
I'm telling you, I'm not doing that.
No one chip
died.
Yeah, I think it's off the market now. But we need to have a Texas playoff bet.
I sent Andy a text that said of the news story of the person passing away eating it. And I said, you literally endangered my life. And he goes, good, you shouldn't have been wrong. That was how competitive we used to get on the show. I'll never eat anything like that again. I'd rather lose money. That's the man's way of paying the consequences for losing. But we do need to come up for a bet. I should get some sort of odds here because I was in this from the beginning and it was a long shot to do so. But
Cam, our producer Cam says that if Texas doesn't make it, you have to order Benihana off of Uber Eats. We'll figure out something. We need the listeners to give us some inspiration because I've been thinking about it for a few days because this feels like the disagreement between us that has some real stakes in it. I was thinking, Ari, today, I think I sent you a text that just said Kansas beating Texas in Austin with a backup quarterback. It's hard for me to think of many funnier scenarios for the podcast and just for the sport than that happening. And it was, Texas has played with its food in the first half.
But I'm not even nervous about this coming weekend, Dave, because they could lose and still make the playoff.
I agree with you.
It's not one of those games where it's I would much rather Texas lose 47-41 to Oklahoma in an exciting game than drop a game to BYU or Kansas State or TCU.
Now, counterpoint, Ari, in the playoff era, I actually think losing a dumb game can help you.
Yeah,
the committee doesn't care about that. You want the big wins, like beating Oklahoma and losing to whatever an unranked Kansas State or whatever would be better for your playoff hopes than losing to Oklahoma.
I wonder if that mindset would work for Texas though, or if the committee would get trapped into whatever.
Don't tell Texas players that we said that out loud.
Yeah, it's okay if you guys go lose to TCU this year.
Yeah, who just lost to West Virginia. at home, mind you.
Yeah, here, and this is a good Doy 7 here. Texas being a good second half team is the biggest indicator to me. The past few years, they have been dog shit in the second half. Thank you for using Ari lingo. And I also think that the one thing that people hated Sark the most about was inability or lack thereof of second half adjustments when there were things that Texas could do to scheme or use their talent advantage to their favor. It didn't seem that they did a very good job of adjusting to those things last year. And now, like, Texas is just mauling people in the second half, which I think is, like you said, a very good indication of where they can go. So, we'll still see. Maybe Alabama, like Miller Cunningham said, will slip into the national championship game again. Who knows? But there are a lot of teams that are alive still. And that's the reason why I want to spotlight some other teams. We just talked about Oklahoma.
Before we go to quick, Ari,
yeah.
What's your concern level of the fact that it appears, and granted, I could be wrong about this because they've looked shaky against competent defenses, but it appears that Texas may be facing its first competent, experienced offense next week.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going into that game thinking that Texas is automatically going to win. I think Texas is a better football team.
I kind of am.
Well, I hope. I don't know. It's a rivalry game against a team that's scoring 60 points every week. So
yeah,
I don't know what's going to happen. I think Texas should win. I thought they were better going into the year, and I don't know why I would change my mind. Let me ask you one food thing. Not that I trust anything you have to say in this regard. I have a corn dog question for you.
Oh, this is my area of expertise. Sorry. I dare say there are a few foods that I know more about than corn dogs. So please.
Okay, so let me start off with my hot take.
Oh, gosh.
I don't think that I've ever tasted a corn dog that's tasted any different from every other corn dog.
Oh, my gosh, Ari.
And secondly, I've never had a Fletcher's corn dog.
Well, that's
I go out of my way to go get a Fletcher's one and see if there's a difference.
Deal. Here's the issue with the corn dog situation, Ari, is that the best corn dogs thrive with texture. Okay, the thing that makes the Fletcher's corny dog elite, and any corn dog elite, is that you get the crunch on the outside, and then you get the fluffiness of the cornmeal on the inside, and then you get that strong. You can't have a crappy dog in there, so you can have a good dog in there, strong dog in there. The Fletcher's corny dog is the single best corn dog I've ever had in my entire life, and there are a lot of imposters on the State Fair of Texas Fairgrounds, and every time I tell the people are going for the first time, I warn them, do not get the imposter dog. Get the Fletcher's corny dog, the real deal. Cap it off with a fried Snickers. And, buddy, you have
there a brick and mortar establishment for Fletcher's where I could just go get a corn dog on a random Thursday
I believe
in Dallas?
The short answer to that is no. The long answer to that is yes. I believe they have a stand at, like, Clyde Warren Park now. I moved away from Dallas, so that when I moved – they didn't. This was.
I don't know what Clyde Warren Park is, so maybe I just got to be better about like.
Ari, you live in Dallas. You need to take your daughter to Clyde Warren Park. It's a park on top of. It's a park on top of Woodall Rogers Freeway. You go underneath the tunnel, and on top of the tunnel, there's a super nice park with like ping pong tables and a bunch of sitting areas and reading tables and food trucks and kids play areas and a splash pad and a dog park and an ice cream place. It's incredible. Ari, how have you never been to Clyde Warren Park? You live in Dallas for like
I don't ever go downtown.
Well, that's fine, but you need to take your daughter to Clyde Warren Park like next week, Ari, and then you can thank me on the pod.
We'll do that. Yeah. we are at the phase of like, what the hell do we do with her?
Yeah.
Part of life. Fletcher's corn dogs is the Filet-O-Fish of corn dogs, Ari. Okay. I have been downtown. I did the JFK tour. Okay, I saw where it all went down.
Let's not talk about our experiences downtown, Ari. We don't have time for that on this podcast.
Yeah, I've been to the museum. I've seen the book depository. That's suppository. And this is why I actually think that the whole JFK assassination is just not what it seems. Okay, I'm kidding. Okay, let's shine some light on a few other people that deserve it. Okay, Oklahoma, we just got them talking about. They beat Iowa State 50-20.
50 points against John Heacock defense. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Yep. Okay, Missouri, a team that you're very familiar with because it got you your unbelievable journalism degree that gets you first place awards in the FWAA writing competition. Number 23, Mizzou tops Vandy 38-21. I don't know if it's a very impressive win. I think that what's impressive is that they have improved to 5-0 for the first time since 2013. Quarterback Brady Cook, who got booed by his own fans 2 weeks ago, set the conference record for most consecutive pass attempts without an interception at 326. And there's a discussion to be had here about who's the second best team in the SEC East. Is it Tennessee, Mizzou, or Kentucky?
I'd vote Kentucky.
I thought you were going to say it would be Georgia and then give us a real hot take.
Oh, that's a heck of a hot take. Yeah. So listen, you talk to Mizzou people, I talked to some of their staffers in the offseason. I think they know Brady Cook is not going to win a Heisman Trophy, but they really like that kid. And I think they were really optimistic that if he can stay healthy this year, which he's been banged up, but he played most of last season with a torn labrum, and they were really high on hey, he can win us some ball games. And you kind of saw that from Eli in his post-game conference, a couple weeks ago. I forget which game that was, K-State maybe. But they really liked him, and they think he can win some ball games for him. And he has, between Theo Weiss and Luther Burden, and then Nathaniel Pete, they got some dudes on the offensive skill position, and they're pretty good on the lines. And I thought they were going to be kind of feisty this year because of the defense, but for them to be sitting here at 5-0 and have looked really solid, and you have a quality win in K-State, you got to tip your cap to the Tigers at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. And listen, anytime a team can start 5-0 playing in the conference that team plays in, it's worthy of at least a passing acknowledgement. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I think they should be crowned national champions or anything like that. But, that's how you get on the radar. You get on the radar, and the more games you win, the more likely it is that you have a big game, and then you might win that big game, and then boom, you arrive. They're playing LSU this weekend. LSU is a home game. I think that LSU is a beatable team based on what we've seen from them the last, month.
Where is that game? Is that in?
It's in Columbia.
Yeah.
And they get through that game, and they've got a road game at Kentucky, which is also could be a legitimizing win. Then they get home at against South Carolina, another game that they could feasibly win. And there is a chance. It is out there. There is a chance that Mizzou is 8-0 when they play Georgia. And then we'll be talking about it a little bit more on the pod. But we are going to call these segments the walking acknowledgments, because these teams deserve to be at least discussed for a minute as we continue on through the big games of the day. So number 6, Penn State sluggish start turns into a blowout win, 41-13 over Northwestern. I think that they were tied at halftime and then ended up covering the 26.5 point spread. They won 41-13. Penn State this year has scored garbage time touchdowns in the final moments twice to cover spreads. Don't ask me how I know that. I love you, Penn State. Okay, next. Iowa, Michigan State. I watched a large portion of this game because I didn't get to see much of it. I wanted to see how on earth Iowa could be favored by double digits against anybody.
Ari, I'm scared to tell you where I spent my evening after the game. I met up with Roger Sherman of Road Raj fame.
Yeah.
And we ended up at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Westminster, Colorado, because I needed reliable internet.
Was Hooters closed?
I needed reliable internet and a lot of TVs. I needed to do some work and prep for the podcast and be able to watch everything. And the thing is, when you're on the road, I can find good food. But when I need reliable internet and televisions, I kind of generally lean a little bit more toward the chains, because I need to know that I'm not going to get there and have to.
I like Buffalo Wild Wings.
It was pretty good. I mean, I've eaten there plenty of times.
Asian Zing is really, really good.
Yeah, I'm a honey barbecue man myself, but I like Asian Zing. The soy ginger they rolled out a while ago is pretty solid. But in general, sometimes chains can vary widely. We Roger and I both agreed that this was a A1 Buffalo Wild Wings situation out in Westminster, Colorado.
Yeah. No, you're not going to get any me on that one.
But so anyway, I was watching a little bit of Michigan State, Iowa on one of the screens. I was more focused on Ole Miss, LSU, and Notre Dame, Duke. But I didn't particularly enjoy watching much of Iowa, Michigan State. It doesn't sound like either side of the fan bases did either. It just
I mean, listen, it struck me as bizarre that Iowa was favored by 10 the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
I watched most of it, and then I shut it off like in the end of the third quarter with Michigan State winning 16-13, and then Iowa scored 13 points in the fourth quarter to win by exactly 10. It was a push. There's no way that Iowa was ever going to hit a bet by winning by more than 10. Cade McNamara got injured in this game. Deacon Hill, the backup quarterback, had to come in for Iowa.
The Cade injury looks bad too, by the way.
Really it bad. Does. Team stats, Iowa had 14 first downs, which is 10 more than they had last week, but 222 total yards. And Michigan State had a defensive touchdown, which, in my opinion, means that they should add 6 points to the total that Brian Ferentz has.
Yes, it should either that or be taken away, right? Yeah.
He's the beneficiary of defensive touchdowns. If you score, your offense scores for the other team. It's bullshit if it's not acknowledged. But anyway, Michigan State lost by 10. They're a program that's in shambles now for obvious reasons. Iowa improves to 4-1. They won 26-16. Didn't really help them get to the drive to 25. It was 1 point higher than the total. Last week they were shut out.
Yeah,
but this is the exact.
Supposedly, the Michigan State has one offensive touchdown in the last 10 quarters.
Yeah,
that's just. I don't blame the kids. I feel bad.
It's a real kick in
the
the
whole
knackers,
situation. Like, I feel bad for everybody involved that's still, wearing green and white on Saturdays. I feel bad for them, but man.
But also, too, this kind of struck me as the type of game that, like, Kirk Ferentz was like, yes. Ugh. This is Iowa football. We didn't give up an offensive touchdown, 222 thunder roaring yards, controlled the game the entire time, and a win. Like that, I don't know. Like, I think that he's happy. But Iowa fans at a certain point in the game did start chanting "Fire Brian," which I heard from the television. So there's that. That's how it goes. Okay, let's do a little bit of high five for the G5. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Jacksonville State is now 4-1 and 2-0 in Conference USA play after a come-from-behind win over Sam Houston State. They trailed 21-7 at halftime, won 35-28 in overtime, first year at the FBS level.
Rich Rod, getting it done over there. Getting it done.
James Madison also keeps rolling. Now 5-0 on the season after beating South Alabama, who entered the game 4-0. They won 31-10. The Dukes do not qualify for postseason play because of NCAA transition rules.
Who benefits from these?
I don't know.
Why do we need these?
I don't know.
What is the point? I truly, like, they couldn't play in a bowl game or a conference title game last year. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't understand it.
It's ridiculous.
Because the people who pay the punishment are the people who have nothing to do with what happened. That's how it always works.
By the way, we have a complaint in the chat about not mentioning the best comeback of the day. We should mention.
You want to know why? Because I was on UCF -8. That's why we're not talking about it. Okay, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to relive the horror.
Well, let's make Ari do it because it's funny. Ari, your beloved Knights, not the gold. I almost said Golden Knights and subjected myself to 3 weeks of hate mail from UCFN. The Knights up 35-7. End up losing 36-35. But, Ari, did you get any satisfaction out of Timmy McClain's 4th and 5 that proved to be ultimately meaningless, but was one of the most insane plays I've ever seen on a football field?
I was pretty heartbroken the entire time, but I wasn't really amused by anything that was going on in that game.
But Timmy McClain 4th and 5, we're not Sports Center, so we but if you have not seen it, it's absolutely insane. It was the best play I saw all day today. And I saw some pretty good plays from Shedeur Sanders and Caleb Williams. They both had some pretty incredible throws today. Yep. But shout out to the Bears because we've been burying Baylor on this show, wondering if they're the worst
usually
team in the Big
teams
12.
when they're down and out are really down and out. So, like, I think they scored 26 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, which is not usually something that you get from a team that seems to be in the dumps. So,
and Blake Shapen, from what I saw, looked a little. He's not 100%. It didn't seem like.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Okay. Charles Huff's Marshall Thundering Herd moved to 4-0 after beating Old Dominion, who they trailed in the first half, 41-35. Charles Huff is going to be a head coach somewhere else next year, I think.
Yes.
something to keep eyes for. I think I've seen his name in Michigan State's circles that he might be a candidate there. That's just he's a good coach.
I don't know about Michigan State, but he's going to get a job somewhere for sure.
I've seen his name floating around in multiple areas. Memphis edges out Boise State 35-32 to move to 4-1 on the year. Their sole loss coming from Missouri last week. Boise State losing also throws any cracks into your Washington's going to win it all thought process, or?
Well, I'm kidding, Dave. They won by 40 in that game.
I'm just kidding.
I know, but it is what it is. Boise State is a competent football team, and Washington embarrassed them. So it is what it is.
Buffalo picked up its first win of the year, beating Akron 13-10. Shout out to Daniel Garrett, our friend on the show, who said that Akron -2.5 during this Picks podcast was an absolute lock.
I was very curious where that
I
came
see you
from,
in there, Daniel Garrett. I see you there, bud. What happened, man? You can't come in here throwing lock around and expect some degenerate loser like me to not listen to you. What are we doing? You better come back with better winners. I don't want locks in our chat. I want winners in our chat. There's a difference. Which is a good segue to our locks. Both of us were on Penn State -26.5. Unbelievable cover there.
I didn't physically see it. I went down to the field in Boulder, and you texted me. You said, our lock of the week cashed. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. No.
Yeah, no, it was 10-10 at halftime. And I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on. Yeah. And then I think Penn State scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
I feel like my locks of the week are 4-1 or something like that.
No, you're 3-1 on the year. I'm 2-2 on the year. Guest picker Sam had BYU +1.5. That was also correct. The guests are 3-1 on the year. BYU's team mascot Cosmo did backflips over a flaming jump rope during halftime of the Cincinnati game. It kind of reminded me of old school a little bit, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Okay, guys, thank you so much for making it through our Saturday night reaction show. That was a lot to get through. I don't know if there was any seismic shift in the results of the day, but I felt like
my only thought is from the BYU game, I think just in general, college sports needs to involve more fire. I feel like that's a can't lose situation. So if you're listening to this and you're part of a game day experience team at any college stadium, find ways to get fire involved. Let's do this thing. Just more fire in general. So anyway, all right, I'll let you close this out.
Yes. Okay. All right. Daniel Garrett's still here. Just bring me a winner. I don't want a lock. I want a winner. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for typing in your thoughts into the chat here. We got you incorporated to some degree on the Saturday night show. On Sunday, we can get you incorporated way more if you call the hotline number 316-462-9852 and leave a voicemail. We will play your voices, your beautiful voices on the show. I think it's a far more interactive show and certainly one of the best additions and great idea from Camelina, our producer. Again, United until Saturday's phone line is 316-462-9852. Be sure to like, subscribe, share all the things on both the YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts. The more awareness that we get on the show, the more likely it is to grow and, of course, thrive long term. Appreciate you guys for your continued support on both platforms, and we will be here all season. So enjoy the rest of your Saturday night. Tweet us what you're eating for breakfast on Sunday morning, and then Sunday evening we will be back live on YouTube for Sunday Sound Off. Thanks so much, guys, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bring back the turnover chain.